I wanted to share some real practical things that I think will be helpful to you and then give plenty of time for Q&A about anything that we've talked about today. So the first one, just kind of thinking about ministry philosophy again, one of the ways to build your financial strength is making sure that as a church, you're building and growing leaders. Building and growing leaders. So often churches make the mistake of trying to hire people to do everything, and often a lot of things that a good, well-trained leader can do. And so we have to understand that our role as pastors is primarily to equip the saints, not to do ministry. And so we have to constantly remind our staff, we hired you not to go do ministry. We hired you to train people to do ministry. So, of course, there are some things, just like at your church, that our staff can't really give away. But there are a lot of things that our staff should be giving away, developing leaders. But if you develop leaders, and again, this is what's so powerful about CLI. If you develop leaders, they're going to give you their money, they're going to give you their time, they're going to give you their experience and education, expertise. They're going to bring so much to the table. And really, that's what we're all created to do, right? We're God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which He prepared beforehand for us to do. So our staff should be working to harvest that potential and to help our church to live into their purpose. And just like with your giving, when we're trying to help people step into their purpose and make a difference, it's not because the church needs you. If we posture everything that way, I just don't think that really moves people. We've got to help them to understand we want something for you, not from you. Again, that same idea that we want to help people discover their redemptive purpose and make a difference, because then they get to experience what life, the greatest, most people, their whole life is just, we're working and paying the bills, trying to keep up, hoping to get enough sleep to survive tomorrow. Man, what a terrible way to live. So if we can help people to live with a sense of purpose and making a difference and seeing how what they do is changing the lives of other people, you've given them life. You've changed their life. It's so good for them. And so I think if we understand that and we're developing leaders, that's good. So you want to make sure you've got a step-by-step process for leadership development. How do we make that simple and obvious so that as people are growing in their faith and getting engaged in our church, it's obvious there's the path if I want to be a leader. And they can get on that path and you're helping to develop them. And then we've got some very intentional things like when you got here today, I don't know if you noticed it, but there were some kids running around the parking lot. Well, that's our College 252 program. So that's a leadership. It's a summer long for college students where they're here all day, every day. And so we're training them to spend time with God. We're training them physically. They meet with a staff person every day for some type of leadership, ministry, spiritual talk, something that's investing in them. And then they all pick a track where they're serving in that ministry throughout the year. So we're developing them as a leader. And even if they never do ministry, they become a great leader, and that's going to help somebody's churches somewhere. It's going to help them to be better in every area of their life. If you turn someone into a leader, they will succeed in every area of their life. So that's why it's, one of the reasons it's so powerful. So that's intentional. We've got a young adult intensive, which is a similar program, but it's real intentional. Another thing that a lot of churches can do is to identify retired adults in your community, in your church community, and give them some work to do. Give them something meaningful to do. They'd love to have something to do other than just sitting around. Now, that often, in fact, I think about my own father-in-law. He quit working, and he was dead 3 years later. And a big part of the reason he ended up developing dementia and went downhill real quick, but it's like he lost his routine that kept his mind engaged. And when he lost that, man, it's like he just fell off a cliff. And so if we can give the retired adults in our community something meaningful to do, it really makes a big difference. Here's another simple thing. You got to build a year-round comprehensive strategy for helping people experience financial freedom. So here's some examples. This year, the way our approach in preaching is, I'm preaching on giving once a quarter this year. So I did that talk in February. I've actually, one of our executive pastors is teaching on giving, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, he's going to do the giving message. But we're going to do it once a quarter. Some years, instead of doing it once a quarter, we do a fall series, 4 or 5 weeks in a row on giving. But you want to do that every single year. You got to come back to it. Remember, Jesus talks about giving way, way more than we do. And so it's not too much. This is a huge barrier in the spiritual. Here's why this again, this is hopefully will help you philosophically to think about this. If sin is independence and the Christian life is about dependence, living in relationship with God, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that money, more than anything else in our culture, I think, pushes people towards independence. And so we have to constantly help them manage their money so their money is not pushing them towards independence and away from Jesus. So we got to just keep working on that. So every week we announce giving. So in other words, a lot of us don't pass a bucket anymore. If you do, great. But since COVID, a lot of us don't. So for us, we don't. But every week we say, hey, if you'd like to contribute to our ministry, if you'd like to give, here's how you can do that. You can give online. You can use the NFC card on the back of the chair in front of you, or you can drop a check in one of the boxes on the way out. We have several giving boxes, so they're in real obvious places where people can see them on the way out. We just want to make that process easy for people. And most of our church, like many of your churches, most of our church, I think 80% of our church gives online now. So every week it's just kind of a reoccurring gift. And one of the real advantages of giving online is I know this is true for the software or system or whatever you call it that we use. When somebody gives for the first time, it is asking them, do you want to make this a reoccurring gift? So the first time they give, then the software is doing it for you. It's automatically asking, hey, do you want to make this a reoccurring gift? Do you want to start giving this every month? And so it's helping you with that. So that's important. We also, in our community groups, we have 12 spiritual practices, and every month we emphasize one of those practices. So one of the months, for the whole month, so all 4 or 5 weeks that our group gets together, one of the things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about giving. So we're going to do it in the stage. We're also going to do it in a small group environment, in a relational environment. And I think one of the things we got to work against in church world is for our giving and our money to be private. You know, it's like in church world, it's kind of like we've got this secret little sin issue over here, and we don't want anybody to talk to us about it. And I think we need to bring it out of the darkness and into the light. We need to talk about our financial situation. We need to talk about our giving. And we need to help our church learn to be comfortable with that. Because anything that is hidden can't be healed. If we don't bring it into the light and deal with it, then we're going to continue to be enslaved to it. A third thing we do is we have financial peace small groups. So, we have a small group that somebody's taking them through a process of helping them to look at the big picture in regard to their financial plan. And if we help them with that big picture, then giving becomes easy. If we're not going to help them with the big picture and they're already overextended living to paycheck, you can't preach good enough to make them give. Nobody can. But if we help them get themselves in better shape financially and create some margin in their life, then they can give. We have mentoring groups that are emphasize giving. We have a fall vision offering. So every year, second week of December, we kind of take a special offering because that's when people are in this kind of generosity move, right? Well, before we do that, we take 5 or 6 weeks, and every week, we take 5 to maybe 10 minutes some Sundays to really highlight one of our missions partners and announce the missions offering that's coming up so that they understand what their giving is accomplishing. And our December month is always 2 or 3 times as big as a normal month in giving for us because we've done that every year. We have a biannual or quarterly meetings with our top givers and key donors. That's really helped us this year. So meeting with those guys, helping them understand this is what's happened over the last year. this is the kind of things, some things that we're working on. Here's kind of next steps for us as a church. Here's where we are financially. And what I'm trying to do is I want them to feel ownership for the whole vision and the financial condition of the church. I want them to feel like that's their problem as much as it's my problem. You know, we're all in this together. And then we want to develop the gift of giving in our church, just like you would develop any other gift, and to give extra attention to people who have greater capacity in that area. Now, that's a little bit of a sticky thing in our church world, but let me explain it this way. If somebody came to your church, so like us, y'all have a worship team and musicians, and if somebody comes to our church and they're a musician, we want to develop that gift, right? And then if they have a lot of capacity, man, we give them special attention. And you could apply that to anything else. If somebody comes to your church and you realize they got a teaching gift, man, you want to develop that gift, and you realize it's a really good gift. They get some special attention and probably get to teach on Sunday, right? Or if somebody comes into your church and they're just a real bubbly personality, so positive, encouraging, you want to put that person on the door, right? And if they're good at that and you can develop them as a leader, you're going to put them in charge of your entire guest experience, right? You're developing a gift and giving special attention to people with greater capacity. Well, the same thing should be true in the financial world. So if you're developing people's finances and you recognize people who are giving and have great capacity, I'm going to give them some special attention for their sake. Again, you've got to recognize it's not just because I think the devil gets us kind of hung up on this idea that, oh, God, that's kind of selfish and we're trying to take advantage of people. No, we're trying to help people live in their redemptive purpose. When you get to heaven, every person in heaven will think, I should have given more. Every single person in heaven will think that. And so with big capacity people, I want to develop and strengthen my friendship with them so that I can help them really leverage what God's trusted them with to make a difference for the kingdom of God. So that's an important role that you play as a leader and a pastor in your church with those people. There's some people in my church that I'm friends with and I spend extra time with that no one else in my church could get close to them if they tried to. If they called and said, hey, I'd love, they're too busy. They're traveling all over the world. They've got 100 things going. They would not give that person the time of day. But if I call, they'll go to lunch with me because I can help them spiritually. And if I make that investment spiritually, then they begin to leverage their resources for helping you build the kingdom. So it's really caring well for that person to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I want to make sure that I'm helping them to be a good steward of what God's trusting them with. Here's some practical kind of budget things. I mentioned this already. We build our budget every year on 90% of the previous year's income. So we go into the year with 10% margin, and then hopefully we're going to grow that year. So then I'm going to end up with some margin that I can bank. Now, the reason it's so important to bank and to have some margin is to take advantage of opportunities when they arise. So, for example, this building, a few years ago, we had created enough margin that when this building came available, we were able to jump on it. It was about to go into foreclosure. It's 14 acres. It was about, at the time, it was about 50,000 square feet, 14 acres on the interstate. We paid $1.3 million for it. And then we built these other couple of, but I got $8 million total in this campus. 70,000 square feet, 14 acres on the interstate, $8 million. There's another church in our town right now who's building a church building that is 80,000. I got 70. He's building 80,000 square feet. He's paying $38 million for it. Well, the reason we were able to jump on that is we had enough margin that when that opportunity came, we could act. And most churches can't. So you want to give yourself margin so when opportunities come, you can jump on it, because we could have never afforded a church of $38 million. But we could buy one and have an incredible facility for $8 million. That makes a big difference. So you want to build in that. Generally, with our budget, we keep our personnel below 50%. We keep our buildings below 35%. Cash. We were talking about cash reserves. I don't think this is necessarily a hard, fast rule, but if you want to know what we do is 3 months. So we're going to have 3 months. So whatever our budget is for 3 months, we're going to have that amount of cash sitting in the bank. And to somebody's point, we're not going to have more than that. So we're not going to ever have millions of dollars sitting in the bank that we're not intentionally doing something with it. But we do have that 3 months reserve. You do have to calendar your expenses. So for all of us, there are certain times of the year that we spend a lot more money. So we spend a bunch of money at Easter that we wouldn't normally spend in a normal month. So all of that is budgeted out to where it's the same amount every month in those big categories. And if you've got cash reserves, that's not any problem, right? Because you're not living month to month, just like at your house. Missions, we try to give 10%. Last year we gave about 18% to missions. But we have an intentional. We have an international partner. We have a couple of national partners, and then we have a bunch of local partners. So we're just trying to be intentional about that. We do a yearly audit. It is, I think we pay about $15,000 a year. Might pay a little more than that. Might be closer to $20,000 a year for an audit. But it really, I think it just provides a lot of credibility for us as a church. And we have a person, the guy that was supposed to share with me today, he's a certified, CPA, so he's an accountant. He's got all the credentials, but still we want to have that outside person who's looking over our books that really protects all of us. Another simple thing is you need to have checks and balances. So the way we do in our church, our staff, our executive staff, builds a budget, and they're responsible for managing the budget. But then we have a group of lay people that are trustees. None of them are paid. They're just church members. And they have all the financial authority. So they approve the budget. They approve any expenses above the budget. They approve any kind of legal contracts that we enter into. They approve if we buy or sell property. They approve all of those. They approve any changes that we would make to the bylaws. So that's a group of normal church people, not paid people. And so we've got a good balance there. They're not managing the budget because they're not around day to day. That would be completely impractical. But they do have authority over it, and our staff understands that that they've got to stay in line with that. Salaries. When we think about church salaries, our church salaries are based on one of these comprehensive staff surveys. So you can go online and look this up. Comprehensive church staff surveys. There's 2 or 3 of them, and you can order it. And it's a big, thick book. It's about that thick. It's big, and it just goes through every kind of church, every kind of position. It helps you to understand what you should be paying your church staff. So all of our staff salaries are based on that. And then for my salary and my the guy that's responsible for all of our staff development and oversees our finances, this controller guy reports to him. But for the 2 of us, there's an outside team that approves my salary and his salary, because we're the ones developing the personnel budget. So we're not responsible for our own salary. So there's a check and a balance there. And I've been here 23 years, but I don't expect to be able to pick my own salary and nobody says anything about it. That's ridiculous, right? So there's an outside group monitoring my salary and his salary, and then we're helping make sure everybody else's salaries are in line. And some years we give a cost of living increase. We've tried to do that as much as we could the last couple of years, with inflation being what it's been. But then we also give raises based on performance, and that's not unspiritual. People in church world ought to perform just like anywhere else, and so that their reward is based on that. If you're going to attract and to keep good talent, you do have to pay them well. And sometimes in church world, we try to skimp on paying our staff, and it ends up costing us way more than we save. A good staff person always pays for themselves. And so hire good talent. In fact, you know why we have a daycare? We don't have a daycare because it makes us any money. Doesn't make us any money. It basically is a break even. We have a daycare because we got a lot of talented staff with little kids. And by having a daycare, they'll stay on our staff and put their kids in our daycare, and we can let them do it for really, really cheap, or it might even be free. I can't remember. And we can throw their cost into the cost of the whole thing, and it's basically kind of lost. Doesn't really cost us anything as a church, but it allows us to keep good talent because we can't pay them what they could make out in the world, and they can't afford necessarily to go and get childcare. Childcare is so expensive, and they love Jesus and they love their spouse. They're having a bunch of babies. So it's like we try to figure out what's the solution for that so we don't lose all this good young talent. So you want to think that way creatively. There's some of this other stuff that I don't really even know how to talk about because I don't do any of this anymore. But you do want to budget for your vision, and you do need to I think, about in developing a clear process for building out your budget. We're in the middle of finalizing our budget right now because we do a July through June budget because it used to drive us crazy every year trying to finalize and do budget during Christmas. That's awful. Now there's no spiritual reason for doing that, but I think it's practically a lot easier for us to pull that off in the summer than it is. We're trying to pull off a million Christmas services, take a week off during the break, and come. It's just a terrible time to be trying to finalize a budget.